So welcome again, and I'm Dave Ginsburg, Chief Marketing Officer of Pluribus Networks. Just a bit of introduction. I've been here for all of 2 weeks. Backing up what Kumar said, it's exciting so far. It's an amazing team and an amazing product offering that you'll see. Brief rehash of the agenda. I'll be providing a little bit of an introduction on Pluribus Networks, some of the business challenges that we're addressing, a little bit of competitive analysis, but what you really want to hear from us this morning, Alessandro going into details on the server switch architecture, then Sune with really deep dive combined with a demo on our product, technology, programmability, and our software-defined fabric, and that's followed by Rolf from the PLM team looking at some of the customer case studies. So one of the things that makes us unique, and this is also something that Kumar has touched upon, is that when we launched a couple weeks ago, it wasn't just the product, it wasn't just some raw technology, it was actually some customer references as well and partner references as well. And I think that's very important in validating what we're doing out in the marketplace. So really, as a bit of reintroduction, company got started 4 years ago, 75 plus employees, some top-line VCs, including NEA, More David Dow, and Menlo Ventures. We've deployed it over 10 customers. These are top-tier customers globally in over 19 countries. And one of the things that you'll hear us talk more about going forward is our global service and support infrastructure. For a company our size, a company our place in the market, it's very critical, especially if we're deployed in content delivery networks or deployed, for example, with technology partners such as Oracle that require this global infrastructure. You'll be hearing more about the Freedom Server Switch product line, but fundamentally it consists of the hardware platforms. You'll learn more about that, as well as the NetVisor operating system that really ties together everything on the fabric and services level. And you'll hear more about that as well. One of the things that we say is that we've really struck a balance between the hardware and the software. And a lot of deficiencies today is that you may have a really good top-of-rack switch, but it has an underpowered control plane, or you may have a really powerful server and application infrastructure, but it doesn't have proper connectivity or intelligence into the network infrastructure. And we've solved a really big problem in combining the two together. What that allows us to do is to go into a number of different markets that we address. It's not just simple L2, L3 connectivity, but it's really the bigger issue of converged infrastructures. You'll hear us talk about network monitoring and analytics. We have live today a cloud deployment. We're in trials with financial trading. And then going forward, you'll hear us talk more about network function virtualization in combining L4 through L7 capability, and then further out some of the network and storage infrastructure concerns as well. So let's look at some of the IT business challenges, how they're solved today, and how we solve them with our Freedom architecture. First of all, network analytics, where the IT manager wants overall visibility at the fabric level, at the network level, at the user level. And they want to be able to select what that visibility is, and they want to have control of it. They want to be able to monitor the applications that are running on their network. I sometimes call this the quality of the application user experience. And also, more and more industries are regulated, so they have to be responsible for compliance and security reporting. The issue is that in today's service layer architecture, there are multiple silos and multiple layers within those silos. You don't really have visibility between NetOps and DevOps, between the overlay and the underlays. You've got separate monitoring networks that each time your network grows, maybe next year it's 2 times, maybe 3 years from now it's 8 times, you have to grow that monitoring fabric as well. And when you do want to do troubleshooting, say you've got issues with applications, issues with security, issues with L2, L3, you have to bring all these different groups to the table. And it's really unscalable. And one of our customers that we'll hear about a little bit later from Rolf is Sanford, and they've addressed some of these problems with our product line. So what we have And what you'll be hearing more about in the coming 2 weeks is what we call in-network analytics, where we're addressing both CapEx and OpEx concerns. CapEx concerns in terms of not needing the separate monitoring fabric, and OpEx concerns by lowering the time to problem resolution. So that's number one. The second issue is scaling SDN and network function virtualization and ensuring performance across your service delivery infrastructure. What you want and what IT managers want is a network that is agnostic to what types of controllers and orchestration technologies you use, and you want to be able to manage it as a single entity and not have to bring in, management or third-party tools from 3 or 4 different vendors to be able to create an end-to-end solution. Unfortunately, we have some issues with today's solution. There's a lack of efficiency due to the separation of the controller from the network infrastructure. There's a lot of hairpinning going on. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the control infrastructure. You don't only have physical appliance sprawl. We talk about as, the bump in the network, but we're beginning to see virtual appliance sprawl. And another issue, interestingly enough, is some of the L4 through 7 vendors that are out there that are very much invested in the physical infrastructure. They're sometimes having a problem transitioning, making that paradigm shift into the NFV space. So we want to help them solve that by introducing in-network SDN and NFV, where we optimize both the hardware and the software infrastructure to enable scalability, enabling production deployments that are manageable, and as you heard earlier today, SDN done right. And that's one of the things we're talking about. Number 3, service partitioning and network partitioning, the virtualization and hypervisor question, where IT managers want ease of reconfiguration, they want it to be controllable and secure at the same time, and they want to have maximum utilization of their assets. If, for example, VMs need to shift from one type of application or service to another, they want to be able to have that dynamically without a lot of management infrastructure. Going forward, you've heard the term software-defined storage or storage as a service. They want that storage control as well, and all the while maintaining SLAs. And it's not only maintaining SLAs at the application services level, but what's happening down there at the network infrastructure level and at the hypervisor level. Today's virtualization, they have issues in transferring VM workloads from pod to pod or cluster to cluster. The networks are not as elastic as they're needed because, once again, they've got to manage things at L2, L3, they've got to manage things at the hypervisor level, they've got to manage things at the application delivery level. And once again, you saw when I talked about the analytics, you have to bring multiple groups to the table at the same time to be able to actually do this effectively. Because of that, your services sometimes lag deployment, and you have additional operational complexities. They sometimes call it ships in the night between the overlay infrastructure and the underlay infrastructure and how they effectively manage that. So you'll hear later from Rolf about a use case we have in high-frequency trading that begins to address these concerns. So what do we have? We call it Pluribus in-network virtualization, where we're addressing the network elasticity problems, the asset utilization problems, by having what we call wire once and rewire virtually, where for the first time we're combining the network infrastructure layer, the application infrastructure layer, and creating greater visibility with regards to the movement and the provisioning of virtual machines in a hypervisor environment. Fourth, this is where we're looking at the network infrastructure as a whole, and where the network to be more visible to the application layer and vice versa. The applications have more control over what's happening at the network layer. We also want people to be able to enjoy what I call the convergence dividend, where you have converged network infrastructure. Sometimes people call these pods or stacks or engineered solutions, and you want to be able to enjoy some of the rack savings that you are intended to enjoy by combining some of these technologies. There's obvious cost savings there. And at the same time, you want to be able to leverage merchant silicon. They're basically reducing the CapEx via not only open hardware architectures, but also the application of open software architectures. An issue today is that as additional applications are deployed, they're many times siloed, the network's not adaptable, the network is not tuned, and at the same time, you heard me talk earlier about analytics. You want to have deep analytics capabilities across the network, but lots of times existing ASIC technologies do not enable this. And you'll hear us talk about later, Cloudflare is one of our initial customers, and they've addressed some of these exact concerns with our server switch product line. So what do we have? In-network application and programmability. Ultimately, the savings through network convergence and application control of the network. And it's based, once again, on our hardware architecture that you'll hear more about, as well as our NetVisor operating system. A little bit on the competitive landscape. You know, where do we sit as a company, and where do we see where some of the competitors lie? And once again, not intended to be an all-inclusive map, but we sort of partition the network into, or partition the marketplace into a couple different areas. One, people more focus on boxes. And you've got some vendors that are more of an economic play, and this is where the whole discussion of white boxes fit in. Basic layer 2, layer 3 forwarding, because it's very hard to be able to validate higher order applications when you have a broad swath of really ODM hardware, and you have to write to the lowest common denominator. And then on the right side of the screen, some of the traditional networking vendors that came from the custom ASIC space, came from the custom network, closed network operating system space. Some are trying to move to be more open, but once again, they're addressing it more, this is my network infrastructure, this is my box-by-box solution. We have another tier of vendors that are taking more of an architectural play, some coming at it more from the software side of the house, VMware probably the best example, but once again, not doing as much as they could to address the ships in the night issue that I spoke about. At the same time, you have vendors coming at it more from the hardware-centric side, Cisco possibly the best example there, that are trying to promulgate an end-to-end architecture, but once again, if you go into the majority of the customers and they want to deploy the latest and greatest, there's definitely a rip and replace mentality out there. We want to get away from that. So what we're doing from Pluribus Networks is really combining the best of both worlds, from the software-centric side of the house, hardware-centric side of the house, bringing them together in an optimized and open infrastructure. And one way of looking at it is we're really making the network more strategic to applications. And at the same time, we're empowering both the DevOps teams and the NetOps teams. We're not leaving one or the other behind. So what are some of the applications? 2 weeks ago, when we announced the Freedom Server Switch product line, we also had an announcement with Oracle, one of our partners in the space, and we're working with them on converged infrastructures for cloud service deployments. And this is really at the rack level where they needed powerful orchestration, they needed powerful control to really bring together the storage infrastructure, the compute infrastructure, and ourselves in the top of rack. We're working in the HFT space, and that's where you have the server switch as really the ideal platform to bring high-frequency trading applications, some of the proprietary algorithms, closer into the network infrastructure, closer to the users and closer to the data. And you'll hear more about that. Next generation value-add content delivery networks. Cloudflare, the best example of this, one of our initial customers, deployed our platform, once again bringing more visibility and control into their global deployment. And at the same time, the idea is going forward, you've heard a lot about some of these DDoS attacks going on. They can overlay additional network-centric services on top of the server switch infrastructure. And then finally, our first OEM partner, TIBCO, who is using our platform as part of their faster-than-light switch offering, and that's once again bringing their proprietary messaging bus applications onto our server switch, bringing it much closer to the end users and much closer to the databases. And you'll hear about pretty massive, if you're looking at enterprise messaging buses, massive savings in latency across the network infrastructure. So finally, the business value proposition, really in 3 parts. One, an open architecture to allow the deployment for the first time of true network-aware services and applications. And at the end of the day, we're converting the network from a cost center into a profit center, and that's very important. 2, on the infrastructure simplification front, based on open architectures, combining compute, storage, virtualization, and the network, we're able to really relieve the end users from some of the redundant deployments, and there's also demonstrable CapEx and OpEx savings. And 3, automation. And this I talked about empowering DevOps and NetOps to drive network simplification and ease of management, and at the end of the day, a faster, more effective, more elastic delivery of IT services and applications. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.